Would you say your arms are genetically a strong point for you? Or did you really have to like put in a massive amount of work for that?
Very much so, yeah. I think that they responded initially very quickly. I think when I first started, I was in Iraq and I was lifting, and I think my arms jumped up like 3 inches before anything else really responded at all. So I looked very disproportionate. I think I was like 100 and, I don't know, 54 pounds at 5'11" and had like 16-inch arms. So very silly looking back, but it wasn't like I was just training arms. I was training everything. I just mechanically utilized them as my leverage point so easily. So yeah, arms responded really well initially, and they still do. There's been periods where I've not done any arm training for 6 to 9 months.
And nothing's changed.
I would say they could have probably progressed a little bit in terms of proportion and size. I don't think that they made much of a regression. And if they did, then throw them a couple arm days and they'll be back to stuff.
That is a nice problem to have for a lot of naturals, at least. I feel like that is not a strong point, but maybe that's just from who I've spoken with for the most part and what people complain about online. Arms are something where it's like, from what I've heard people complain about, that them being non-responders, they've tried everything and their arms won't grow. I don't know if you're the right person to talk about arm progression then, because they're naturally a strong point for you. So
I think it just comes down to mechanics. And yes, genetics play a role, but the majority of people I train and I look at who bodybuild, if you look at how they fundamentally move their body, typically we have either torso dominant individuals or arm dominant, arm and shoulder dominant individuals. And so it comes down to how they lift the weight, right off the bat. If they're moving through their shoulder girdle and initial bicep curl, then, well, here's a reason why we're retracting from bicep engagement. And same thing with triceps. A lot of people have their lats take over their posterior deltoid when they're doing a tricep movement. So I'll make a lot of those corrections and say, hey, we're going to move through the elbow joint and fix the shoulder joint here to incorporate more hypertrophy of the arm. That came naturally for me because my first bodybuilding show, I thought I had a great back and chest and shoulders. And I got on stage and they were non-existent in the photos, but I had decent arms. And it's like, well, there's a problem I need to fix.
Right. Yeah, I guess, well, not I guess, a lot of it can be, well, for the first thing within your control, what is that? Well, yeah, execution, exercise selection, and then nutrition to an extent. But if that's all taken care of, then it's the selection and execution, of course. For example, if all your presses turn into a close grip press and
Yes.
you feel triceps for the most part, I mean, I'm sure that's going to have an influence on someone having, more talking about development, their arms being more developed than, say, their chest, for example, if they're struggling to grow their chest. Like if they're the reverse of what we were talking about before, where that is the case. Was that the case for you as well? Like if we're talking about your compounds, were you naturally just feeling your arms as well when you were doing those lifts?
Absolutely. I think with that I could definitely underhand bench or close grip bench the same amount as my regular bench was. And same thing with my pulling movements is very elbow dominant, a lot of bicep engagement with my rows and my pull-ups and my lat pull downs. So it actually took many years for me to identify those biomechanical factors. They go, okay, I need to shut this area off from assisting and really focus on the target muscle group. And that was a big change in my program. I'd say 2011 was when I said, okay, we're going to do a lot more torso dominant work and leave arms as an afterthought. And then looking back, I was like, wow, I was probably hitting arms 4 times a week because I was doing 4 upper body days. I would dare say they were just arm days initially. That really changed as my education improved and my contest experience.
That's a great point you brought up, because if you are training upper body, say 3-4 times per week, and they're not necessarily like full upper days 3-4 times a week, they're kind of like how you mentioned, then exercise execution really does have to target those areas more, because there's going to be overlap regardless. So your exercise execution becomes even more important for you not to get that additional stimulus for things that you don't necessarily want it for. Like we were just speaking about, like if you're doing your presses or your pulls and then everything becomes an arm exercise, well, now you just hit arms pretty much, like you mentioned, 3-4 times a week for the most part, right?
Exactly. That was very important for me to understand. And I can apply that now to my clientele when we do their body composition updates, and we can assess weaknesses for their program design. The exercise prescription will be based on that.
Also, if like we go on the reverse side of things, where you're actually really good at engaging with your chest or your back and all your compounds, it's like, nope, I feel it in my lats, I feel it in my traps, I feel it in my pecs. You feel everything in the right areas, goal specific, it's on point, and your arms are lagging. Maybe you would benefit potentially from an arm day at that point where everything is directed specifically to elbow extension, elbow flexion.
Oh yeah.
Right? So if we're talking about hard sets for exercise, what
Yes.
are you averaging, let's say, per exercise? And does it change depending on, of course, the body part you're trying to improve or the exercise itself?
Typically, I